Hello and welcome to this week's LRCC Soundbite. I'm Ian, and I thought over the next few soundbites I'd talk about some of the famous prophets that lived thousands of years ago. Today I thought I'm going to talk about a guy called Daniel. Now Daniel is probably most famous as a man who was thrown into a lion's den. If you don't know the story, then you'd be forgiven for thinking that this isn't a story that's going to end well. But trust me, it's a story of what happens when you trust God and when you do what he says. It all began when Daniel was doing rather well at his job. He was one of a wide group of advisors to the king of Babylon. The trouble was that Daniel was giving the king the best advice. The other advisors, they didn't like that. Daniel was a foreigner. He was from Israel, and the Babylonian advisors were upset. They were jealous. We'd recognise it as being racist today. So they decided to try and find a way to get rid of him. But this wasn't going to be easy because Daniel was the king's favourite. So what they decided to do was use his religion against him. The king was a proud man, and the advisors played on that and convinced him to make a new law that for a whole month no one in the entire land may worship or pray to any god, man, anything except the king himself. This left Daniel with a problem. Daniel was a devout Jew. He would pray to God several times every day. He made no secret of it. In fact, he would face Jerusalem and pray in front of an open window. That's what the other advisors were waiting for, that Daniel would pray to God. And of course, when he did, they went straight to the king and reported him, which they did with great delight. The law the king had signed gave the penalty of being thrown into a den of lions for anyone who broke it. Now, all day, the king tried to find a way to excuse Daniel from this punishment because the king liked him. He was his friend. But there wasn't a way out. As Daniel was thrown in, the king shouted to him, "May the God whom you serve protect you." Now that night, the king didn't sleep, not even for a moment. And the next day, he went sadly to the lion's den, and with little hope he shouted, "Daniel, did your God protect you?" To his amazement, Daniel shouted back, "Yes, God sent an angel who kept the lions from even harming me." The king immediately had Daniel pulled out of that den and found him completely well and completely unharmed. And the king then sent a decree out into the whole land declaring that everyone should worship and honour the God that Daniel worshipped. You don't really want to know what happened to those advisors that had tricked the king. Suffice to say that the lions didn't go hungry after all. Now, when I hear that story, I think about how God can protect me whatever situation I find myself in. And it would be really easy, wouldn't it, to picture this lovely, docile den full of lions that are purring happily, furry, cuddling up. But that's not really the reality of this situation. Daniel was in a bad place. He was being bullied at work. He was being abused by his peers. He was being falsely accused of treason against the king. He was physically thrown into this dark and dirty pit with we don't know how many hungry lions. And those lions, they were regularly fed only on humans. There's not a lot about that picture that's encouraging. But even when Daniel found himself in those dark places, he would go back to the relationship he'd got with God. He'd pray. Quite simply, he'd talk to God. He'd talk about his worries, his concerns, his fears. And when he was in the very darkest place, God came through for him and protected him. God didn't remove him from that dark place, but he protected him in it and looked after him. And that gives me hope when I found myself overwhelmed by the things around me, when I'm unsure of what to do, when I'm trying to deal with unpleasant situations, whether that's at work or at home, wherever it might be. I know that however dark things might seem, God will always be there to come through to me when I really need him the most. This is just one of the stories in the Bible about times when God does just that and comes through for people. If you live on our estate and you don't have a Bible, head to our website. We'd love to give you one for free, and we can even point you at some more stories in there so you can read them for yourself. If you'd like to talk to someone about how to pray, or whether God really is able to do these things, or even if God does he really exist. We'd love to talk to you about that as well. Just get in touch. We'd love to talk to you about God. Have a great week. God bless you.